Dillon Gabriel is probably the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Where does he stand nationally? ESPN's pretty high on him. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. Dillon Gabriel, one of you's got a bold prediction that I might have to not completely put out, but perhaps tamper the flames a little bit about the Ohio State game. And Tony Stubblefield is back for Oregon basketball. So let's hop into it. ESPN recently came out, recently-ish, relatively, with a list of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football. They've got Dillon Gabriel up there as number 2 in the entire country. Now, in the Big Ten, the only competition that Gabriel seriously has for the title of, well, who's the best quarterback in the Big Ten is Will Howard. And according to ESPN, the gap between Gabriel and Howard's probably a little bit wider than I would have it. But as I've thought about it more and more, I think I could see that being a realistic thing to think. That Gabriel's the best quarterback in the Big Ten. He's going, assuming he is able to start all 12 games for the Ducks this year. If memory serves, he'll break Bo Nix's all-time starts record. And a guy with that sort of veteran experience who's been a starter everywhere he's gone, it's hard to replicate that sort of stuff. But ESPN had him as number 2 in the country. Now, I think that's a touch high. But the more I look at the quarterbacks in college football, the better I feel about Dillon Gabriel being Oregon's guy. Because I struggle moving Gabriel outside of the top 5. If I were to rank my top 5 quarterbacks in college football, my top 2 in order would be Carson Beck at Georgia, which is who ESPN has as number 1. And I would have Quinn Ewers at Texas as number 2. I'm a big Carson Beck fan. I think Quinn Ewers is really good, took a big step forward this past year. After that, I think there's a lot of debate. Now, ESPN's a lot higher on Jalen Milroe than I am personally. I think he's got a lot of potential, and he's got some innate traits and talent, but he's still got a little bit more to prove. And I lean towards someone who's proven like Gabriel than a guy like Jalen Milroe. And Gabriel was a highly sought-after commodity in the transfer portal for a reason. And I think that what he has at Oregon is, in fact, better than what he had at Oklahoma. Now, a number of you have raised the point before of, hey, look at the jump that Bo Nix made. And I saw this graphic flying around Twitter recently as well. Look at the jump in Bo Nix's numbers from 2021 to what he did in 22 and 23 with the Ducks, and the numbers are so much different. And they were. But they were starting from a much lower point. And I think that Gabriel is a more refined and better overall quarterback right now than Bo Nix was when he left Auburn. And Nix had more to climb in his progression towards realizing his full potential, which he, of course, did with the Ducks en route to a Heisman ceremony this past year. But I think that Gabriel is in a position where he knows what it takes to win playing in a legit conference. The Big 12 last year was pretty solid, pretty darn solid. He was able to beat Texas. They, of course, lost games to Oklahoma State and Kansas, but I think that, certainly those were not the best days for Dillon Gabriel. I watched good chunks of those games. However, to say that he was the reason they lost those games, I don't think is accurate either. Something else I noticed when diving into, where Gabriel should sit in the pantheon of great college football quarterbacks is last year he had an outstanding season. 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 picks, completed almost 70% of his passes. Did you know that he didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver? Just going to let that sit out there for a moment. I think Jeff Lebby, who's now the head coach of Mississippi State, clearly a good offensive mind, but didn't have a single 1,000-yard receiver. Now, some of that may have been philosophically driven. Perhaps they didn't throw the ball quite as much. But Drake Stoops was their leading receiver, and that's who I've compared Tez Johnson to as it pertains to Gabriel, and why I think Johnson is likely to lead Oregon in receptions in 2024. At least until I see or hear something to the contrary, That's where I feel is I think Johnson maybe doesn't lead him in yards, but certainly would lead him in receptions. But if Stoops was the best wideout he had at Oklahoma, Tez Johnson is probably the second best receiver, talent-wise, that Oregon has. And Johnson's supremely talented, as we all know, right? Set the Oregon single-season receptions record and had a 1,000-yard campaign. But Evan Stewart has got more big play and overall potential than Tez Johnson does. He's a little bit bigger, and I think he's a much more reliable deep threat than Johnson is. Which, aside from the long ball against Cal, which was a heck of a throw from Bo Nix on 2nd and 37, the old 61-yard touchdown, I think it was. Johnson's stuff comes, his best work comes within 10, 15 yards of the line of scrimmage or so. I think that that's great, but I'm really curious to see how that dynamic kind of plays out. But bringing this back to Gabriel for a moment, does he have better weapons than what he had at Oklahoma last year? Yeah, he does. Is it the same gap? Is it the same jump as what Bo Nix had at Auburn? No, not quite. But as I talked about recently on the show, Gabriel probably has the best pass catching unit in the Big Ten. You talk about a receiving core that's among the best in all of college football with Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson and then Trayshawn Holden and Gary Bryant and Jurion Dickey and Kyler Casper there. Like, it doesn't get a whole lot deeper than that. I haven't seen a receiving core in the Big Ten that makes me think, yeah, okay, they're better than Oregon. And then you toss in Terrence Ferguson at the tight end position as well. So he could be set up to have a statistical season that is indeed top 2 or 3 in all of college football. Again, I think Beck and Ewers are better overall talents. I think a guy like Jackson Dart at Ole Miss is really good. But as you start going down the list of who are going to be the best and the biggest names at the quarterback position in college football this year, you can't go very far before Gabriel is in there because of his experience, his proven production, and what he's coming into at Oregon. And by the way, I haven't even mentioned the fact that Oregon's got a great running back room. We'll call it a good running back room pending Noah Whittington's return from injury, which is expected to be a full recovery as far as I have been able to understand. If he and Jordan James are healthy throughout the year, that's a dynamic running back tandem. So you're going to have balance in the offense, and you're not going to ask him to do too much and throw the ball 50 to 60 times a game like Mike Leach offense, a Mike Leach offense would have. R.I.P. Pirate. But I do think that Oregon's just balance and everything they're giving him is so encouraging. And the more I think about it, leading up to the spring game, the more excited I get about what Gabriel can bring to the table. I will say one thing that I have noticed in scouring some photographs and whatnot, and some of you have pointed this out as well, is that Dillon Gabriel has been wearing a knee brace on his right knee. I have no idea what that means. I don't know if it's precautionary. I don't know if he was dealing with something. I don't know. Have not heard. But what I do know is that Oregon's got an offensive line that can protect him and prevent that from becoming something that, could make him miss a game or two. Of course, if that does happen, who's waiting in the wings but Dante Moore? And that looks like Oregon's quarterback, of course, in 2025. But as it pertains to 2024, not a lot of backups who can say they're that highly rated of a recruit and they have starting experience at the power level in college football. So I think that it's a really good quarterback situation. And, Gabriel being number 2 in the country, according to ESPN, as Andy Samberg said, as Nick Cage on SNL's Get in the Cage, that's high praise. Maybe a tad high, but would I have him outside top 5? Probably not. Not when you consider the situation he's got around him, which I feel like gets discussed a lot more in the context of NFL quarterbacks. Oregon fans think about this all the time with Justin Herbert. What sort of receivers does he have around him? What coach does he have around him? Do they have, a good enough offensive line? Oftentimes hasn't been. But in college, quarterback's production, I don't think is quite as tied because of the caliber of defenses you're going up against to what you have around you. But certainly it helps. And there aren't many better offensive situations for Gabriel to be coming into than what he's got with the Ducks. And I think it's the best offense he will have been a part of. And that certainly could line up for a career year. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Let me know what you think. Got some mailbag questions, including a flaming hot take. I mean a flip. This take might even be too hot for me. eBay Motors is just right for me, though, and it's just right for you. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. More on huge wins in just a moment. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, little second segment sip to cool me down for this hot take. Mailbag is always open. YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or @LockedOnDucks. DMs and mentions wide open. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. Link in the description below wherever you listen to or watch this show. One of you in the Subtext community sent in this question. Not a question, prediction. This is a bold prediction. It says, quote, bold prediction. See? Oregon, Ohio State plays out like Utah. Whoa. Whoa. I just talked for almost 10 minutes about the confidence that continues to grow for me in Dillon Gabriel and the offensive situation he's coming into. And I've talked at length on the show before about how I like where Oregon's defense is at going into next year, and how they can be in a conference full of great defenses, historically, one of the best. Because they have recruited well, they have got a lot of guys on the defensive line who I'm really excited to watch in the spring game, kind of see who pops and where the depth chart could fall with regards to the interior of the defensive line, the linebackers a little bit, the secondary. Really, there are parts all over that defense that I'm intrigued to see. But for those who are not remembering, last year Oregon went into Utah, a place where they had not lost with fans in the stands since 2018, and kind of beat the crap out of the Utes 35-6. They out-Utah'd Utah. In those games in 2021 where Utah just out-physicaled Oregon, out-coached them, just beat them flat out, sucker punch, not sucker punch, just a gut punch, an uppercut, a right hook, and then a finishing left hook. It was not close in those games. Oregon did that to Utah last year, and they did it on Utah's home field. 35-6 was the final score. Look, I think Oregon can beat Ohio State. I'm not casting any sort of doubt that the Ducks can win that game. They're currently favored, according to our friends at FanDuel, by 1.5. Game will be at Autzen Stadium on October 12th. Probably the game of the week for that particular lineup of games in all of college football. I think it's going to be electric. I think that Oregon can win. Right now, if I had to pick, I'd say at home, Oregon wins that game. 35-6, can't see it. Cannot see that happening for a couple of reasons. Number one, well, you have to remember about the Utah game last year, which was a great win. No doubt about it. Bryson Barnes was the quarterback for the Utes, and that makes a difference. You are not going to have that level of quarterback play with Ohio State, and that greatly contributed to Oregon winning that game by the margin in which they did. Now, if Cam Rising plays in that game, do I still think Oregon wins? Yes, I absolutely do. Is it 35-6? Not a shot. Not a shot. I think Cam Rising is a little bit better, at least more proven as a long-term starting quarterback than Will Howard is, but certainly Will Howard is solid. And I'll get to him in a moment because there was an interesting soundbite from Ryan Day recently as Ohio State gets ready for their spring game on Saturday, the 13th of April, depending on when you're listening to or watching this show. I thank you for doing that, no matter when you are doing so. But anyway, I digress. Bryson Barnes was a backup quarterback for a reason, and yeah, he had flashes. He had moments. He's going to go start at Utah State this year. Now, we have seen talented quarterbacks go play at the G5 before. Ty Thompson, supremely talented guy. He's going to be Tulane's starter this year. So it's not a complete and total indictment. However, if he was a high-end starter at that level, there were a lot of quarterback vacancies across college football this year. And Bryson Barnes is a guy who was a great story. He was a former walk-on. He's a pig farmer and all this sort of stuff. Did a lot of really good things. But his play in that game was pretty subpar. Now, I thought Oregon's defense played well. And by the way, the previous season, with a defense that was not as good as last year, Oregon made Cam Rising play what my guy JT Wistersill of Locked On Utes described as the worst game he's ever seen Cam Rising play. He had 3 interceptions, he missed throws, made bad reads. They completely stifled him at Autzen Stadium in 2022 in what was probably Oregon's best win of that inaugural season under Dan Lanning and company. So it's not as if Rising, I think, comes in and suddenly makes a difference to win the game, but there's still a gap there. You're not holding Cam Rising to 0 touchdowns. You can do that with Bryson Barnes. You're not going to do that with Rising. So that's the first thing. Here's the second thing. That Utah game was a fantastic display of the talent on Oregon's roster because that Utah team was good. That Utah roster was good. It's very similar to the one they'll have this year. The Utes are the favorites in the Big 12 with Cam Rising back at quarterback. They should be. They should be. They absolutely are in my book. In every sports book that I have seen, FanDuel's, of course, the only one that matters. But anyway, I digress once again. Utah is a very good team with a very good coach. Ohio State's roster is still a level above that. I don't think that Ohio State roster is capable of being 35-6 by anybody, including Oregon. And by the way, I don't think Georgia could do it to them. That doesn't mean you couldn't win the game by, 10 to 14 points, or heck, even pull away. If you get a couple of turnovers here or there, or this thing goes that way, or it works out just right, sure, you can open up a lead there. But to say that game could be 21 to 3 at the half, and then Oregon goes 14-3 in the second half and has got the backups in by the end, I'd be shocked. I would be singing Oregon's praises, first of all, and most obviously perhaps, if that were to take place. But that Ohio State roster is too good. Their coaching staff is too good, and assuming they are fully healthy at the quarterback position, I don't see Oregon being able to do to Ohio State what they did to Utah last year. But I respect the boldness of the take. I'm here for bold takes. If you got a bold take you want to submit, you want me to react to it on the show, by all means, drop in the mailbag. I'm always here for it. I feel really good about Oregon, though. And I think, frankly, let me double check the odds real quick. FanDuel's got the odds up for Big Ten Conference Championship winners, and Ohio State's here's the interesting thing. Ohio State is plus 155, Oregon's plus 250, but Oregon's favored by 1.5. Now it's at Autzen Stadium, which means Ohio State would be a slight favorite on a neutral field, but that's a pretty sizable gap. I think there's some value on Oregon plus 250 to win the Big Ten. I'm not a believer in Michigan because of what their quarterback situation is going to look like. Penn State is a really good program with a good coach, but they have consistently shown an inability to compete with the big boys in the Big Ten. Maybe this is their year with Michigan being a pullback team. I wouldn't sleep on USC to be a dark horse player in the Big Ten, but certainly I think Oregon at plus 250 is not terrible value there. But I think that as it pertains to Ohio State, Oregon is very good, but that Ohio State roster is excellent. Got to give credit where credit's due. They've got a great staff. They've got a great roster, and I fully expect Ohio State to be good. So that's why I think that take is just a little bit too hot. And by the way, this is something that, just to clarify, for any of you who may have seen or heard it out there, USC defensive tackle Bear Alexander, one-time Georgia Bulldog, is not in the transfer portal. It was reported that he was going to enter, and then he came out personally with a message saying, don't know where you guys got that from, not going anywhere, coming back to USC. As the transfer portal opens on Tuesday, I fully expect there to be departures from Oregon's roster. Don't expect it to be anybody major, but we'll see. We've been surprised by stuff before. Josh Pate thinks it's going to be a wild, crazy transfer portal cycle here in the spring. Could be. Absolutely could be. But I would be surprised if Oregon is supremely active. I think they've done most, if not all, of the work they needed to do in the portal. That can always change. If Bear Alexander had been in the transfer portal, yeah, I'd take him. I'd take him in a heartbeat. But unless it's that caliber of guy, I don't think Oregon has a glaring need anywhere. Maybe at safety. Maybe you could go and find a safety, but it would be a guy who would come in as a depth piece rather than as a starter, because at least on paper, you've already brought in the starters at the safety position. But love the questions. Keep them coming as always. Oregon basketball. Did you see what move they made? Piqued my curiosity, to say the least. Let's just go straight into this. Have you checked out Game Time yet? If not, you should, because Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Not up, down, which is better, because it's more affordable. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, their lowest price guarantee, that is, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60%. 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Whatever you want, they've got it. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Much like Voldemort in Order of the Phoenix, in the words of Cornelius Fudge, he's back. So my Harry Potter fans will get that reference. For those who are not, don't worry about it. Tony Stubblefield is back with Oregon. He had been an assistant on Dana Altman's staff for a while, went to go take the head coaching job at DePaul. And if you look at the history of DePaul men's basketball, it's not an easy job. It is not an easy job. Didn't work out for him over there, but he is back with Oregon now on staff. So, couple of things here. First of all, my initial reaction was, does this mean the moves are about to show up? Don't know. I've been asking that question for a while here on the show. I'll continue asking until Oregon, announces moves out of the transfer portal. But I think that the Ducks have got transfer portal needs, and I feel like you wouldn't announce that an assistant coach, this had been rumored for a while, right? He was showing up at the Pac-12 tournament, and he was just around Oregon basketball all the time. So, maybe there's a legal or HR reason as to why they waited until now. But when you want to generate, some offseason headlines and momentum and everything like that, I think it makes sense logically to say, okay, we have an assistant coach coming back who was, so good with us before that he was hired to be a head coach at a Power 5 program elsewhere, and he's back on our staff now. And then he kind of let that news marinate for a little bit. And next week, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Oregon starts to announce one or two additions via the transfer portal. Everydayers know I want Tony Perkins from Iowa, Umar Ballo from Arizona. You get those two guys, chef's kiss. That would be fantastic. Now, this question came from Bud regarding Tony Stubblefield as to whether or not he could be a head coach in waiting if Dana were to retire or, whatever could happen there, right? I have not seen Dana Altman's name tied to any job openings out there. The coaching carousel is kind of crazy, but the Kentucky job was open. Looks like they're hiring Mark Pope from BYU, and I don't think Dana Altman's going anywhere. And I don't think Stubblefield would be the automatic head coach in waiting there because of how it went at DePaul. Now, that's a tough job. Oregon's a better job. But would you say that Oregon is as easy of a basketball job as it is a football job? No, I would definitely not make that contention. I'd in fact argue the opposite. So I think Stubblefield is tied to Dana, and if Dana were to retire, let's say in 2 or 3 years' time, or 4 or 5 years' time, because again, we just got reminded this guy can really coach. Oregon went from the NIT to should have been in the Sweet 16 really quick. Dana can still coach, and I don't think there's any hurry. I've got no hurry to push Dana Altman, towards retirement because the guy's really good. 20-plus wins every year he's been with the Ducks. Never lost a first-round postseason tournament game. Like this year was just so exciting and so thrilling, and I think that he's got a lot of positive momentum with the program right now. I don't think Stubblefield is viewed as a head coach in waiting there. I think whenever Dana does decide to retire, let's say it's 3 years from now, just hypothetically, I think Oregon would conduct a national search and find the best candidate that they could. Couple other notes on men's basketball here. And baseball's got an upcoming series with USC. They split with Sacramento State earlier this week. Bad pitching day. Michael Friend had a great outing last week and a bad one against Sac State. Allowed a 7 spot in the first, but no major harm done. Oregon bounced back, hit the ball all over the yard in the second game, and got the win. So they split with the Hornets. That's not that big of a deal. But USC having a solid start to the year. Anyway, that's just a side note there. Cario Oquendo is in the transfer portal. I never expected him to come back to Oregon. He walked at senior day or took part in the senior day festivities. So I never was in the frame of mind, to be honest with you, I was in the frame of mind that he was out of eligibility, but I guess he's got another year. But, he was a guy that came off the bench for the Ducks this past season, and I think had a smaller role, particularly as the year went on, than he was anticipating. So that's 2 guys off the bench that Oregon has lost, in addition to Mo Diawara being out of eligibility. No Oquendo, no Brandon Rigsby, no Mo Diawara. So depth is still a need for the Ducks. Again, just Tony Perkins, Umar Ballo, and Oregon is set, and that is 100% a tournament team. But something else that flew under the radar here, and when I say flew under the radar, I mean if you do a Google search of Oregon basketball commits or Oregon junior college transfer, it takes some serious digging. And shout out to Matt Prame for discussing this the other day. And I missed this because it took place back in October, but it's just not getting publicized anywhere. 24/7 Sports doesn't even have him up on Oregon's transfer commitment list. I think it's because they maybe don't do JUCO guys. I don't know. But Oregon has 2 guys incoming, not just Ibrahim Traore, who is a 6'8" incoming freshman center, also originally from Mali. Just saying. So too was N'Faly Dante. So too is Umar Ballo. But Des Lindsey is Dana's at least first, maybe not last, but perhaps last. Dana loves his JUCO guys in the portal. Well, Des Lindsey is the guy who committed to Oregon back in October. We were all caught up in football and the season that they were having, and basketball hadn't even really gotten underway. And this took place. And I'll be honest, I missed it. And I just was struggling to find information on it because I saw Prame tweeting about it. And then I was like, when did that happen? And then I Googled it and I'm like, I'm not finding anything on this guy. I'm trying to track down stats and information, everything like that. But Lindsey is a 6'6" shooting guard from Florida Southwestern Junior College. I don't think there has been a year in recent memory in which Dana hasn't added at least one JUCO guy. He loves his junior college players. And you know what? With good reason. He's had a lot of success. Boucher was a junior college player. Chris Duarte was. Jadrian Tracy, of course, Bam Tracy, as he's known on this team. Like there have been others as well. It's just a staple of Dana Altman. And you know what? As I've said, I like Dana Altman, and it works. So at Florida Southwestern, Lindsey was about an 11-point-a-game score, 50% from the field, just 29% from 3. But I've seen Oregon make tremendous strides with guys as 3-point shooters, most notably Cario Oquendo. Was not a good 3-point shooter. That's one of the reasons that I was kind of on the fence about adding him to this year's team after Oregon had a historically bad year shooting the 3. I was like, man, they cannot hit a triple to save their life. Why are they bringing in a non-shooter? Well, Oquendo, and Kuznard's a good example of this as well. Oquendo upped his 3-point percentage considerably from last year to this year, and maybe they can do the same with Lindsey, but this is a guy who can score a little bit. He had 20 points in 3 of his final 4 games last year. He averaged 19 points per game in that stretch and went 5 of 16 from beyond the arc. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be 19-point a game scorer for the Ducks. I'm just saying the scoring potential is definitely there. I don't know if he's expected to be a starter. Like right now, without a guy like Tony Perkins from Iowa, who was second team All Big Ten this past season, you certainly would say Lindsey has a chance to be that starting two guard. Maybe it'd be Keyshawn Barthelemy. That'd be a really small backcourt though. But I like having a guy who is a little bit of a slasher. Hopefully he's got a lot of buy-in at the defensive end. I can't find any film on these sorts of guys. It can be tough. Like Jay Harris coming from the D2 level, all you can get for highlights are some videos of like a local news story from his time at Northwest Missouri State. It's just the way of the world. But for those of you that are hoops fans out there, thought this should get noted because legitimately it is hard to know that Des Lindsey is coming to Oregon, but that appears to be the plan. And at 6'6", he brings some, much needed size on the wing off the bench. And I still think Perkins and Ballo are the transfer needs that Oregon should go out and get. But those are the moves that they've made. So that's where things stand. They got to bring in at least one more They got to find a big. Got to find a big out there. Even if you think Traore can contribute a little bit as a freshman, there's got to be a transfer big out there that Oregon can go snag. I'd go Ballo as my number one priority. The guy from FAU who's 7'1" and has had a nice couple of years. I'd take him as well. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and go Ducks.